Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for another Secret Sunday session today. Today, I'm joined by Jeff White, which is, I feel very honoured to be in his presence today because he has a long history of being part of Australia's sporting culture and being in the AFL industry, which is exciting to get to know a bit about him and his journey today. So to kick us off, Jeff, I'm going to ask that question I ask everyone, but who are you and what is it that you are doing with yourself now for those people that don't know?
Oh, nice. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on, Ash. Well, yeah, I've just turned 45, so
Happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah, look, my background is more sporting. I grew up in Melbourne, Victoria, and loved all sports as a kid. Played basketball a lot. Loved my basketball. Was aspiring to be. I guess my first ever idol when I was 10 was Michael Jordan. So I was like, I've got to follow him. But had passions for other different types of sports, tennis, AFL, all that sort of stuff as kids do. Just was really heavily involved in sport. And then when I was 15, I had to make a choice between basketball, playing state basketball, state footy, had to make a choice with studies and stuff like that. And at that time, that's when training becomes really demanding. And so I chose AFL, and 1994, showing my age here, I was drafted to the Fremantle Dockers. So I was an overall number one draft pick, which was pretty cool accolade, which I still hold and to this day, which is really nice. And spent 3 years over there playing football with Fremantle Dockers. Was only able to play 32 AFL games, but knew that I just wanted to return back to Melbourne. So I returned back to Melbourne and ended up playing 11 years with the Melbourne Demons. So 268 AFL games around there. So I guess that's a little bit of a snapshot on the career. And then from there relocated to the Gold Coast in 2008 when I retired, and always loved the marketing sort of side of things when I was playing footy. So got involved with a radio station, but when I got involved with the radio station, which was the start of 2009, I started Twitter. So I started learning about the social media space, all that sort of stuff. And then that sort of gradually sort of evolved to a digital agency, which I still run today. That started in 2010. So I've been involved in social media for a very long time. And then just recently started working on the self-development and self-love sort of stuff. I guess we'll probably touch on today. So I guess that's a little bit of a snapshot and quick version of where I've come from.
Amazing. And if we talk about those initial moments when you started your AFL career, did you think that it was going to end up the way that it did?
I think in the AFL/VFL, when it first started, it was late 1800s. So it's been around for a very long time. And I think the average year that AFL players play is like 3 years. So to play 14 years at the highest level, I never took anything for granted. And you learn a lot, resilience and mental toughness and physical ability, and there's a lot of stuff that goes to the AFL landscape that a lot of big businesses do, small businesses do, any walks of life. So you learn a lot of life lessons. And at a tender age of 17, I was moved, relocated. I never left mum and dad, never left home. The only state I've ever been to was Sydney. Huge sort of culture shock. But I think from my perspective, I always did this. I've always had this. It's always been in my DNA, but to earn respect from people. So when I first got the Freo, I was earn respect, train hard, do all the right things. And then when I got to Melbourne, train hard, earn respect for the players. So I've always had that sort of mentality, and I guess that is something that I sort of really just try to do the right thing, I guess, by anyone and respect everyone that comes into my life. So it was quite fun, great, but learn a lot of life lessons from it as well.
As a young adult, how did that experience change you from going to, playing your local AFL game or playing your local basketball game to then hitting the big leagues? Was that pressure and transition hard for you?
I think you look at it. Everyone used to say, "Oh, there's a lot of pressure being the number one draft pick," but I think you put the pressure on yourself if you think that way. My mentality was to think, "Hey, I'm the number one draft pick for that club." That doesn't say that I'm the number one draft pick for all the other 16 clubs at the time or 15 clubs. So it's your mindset. It's how you actually approach them is to, as a young adult. So
your AFL journey, that your mental health was affected negatively in any way?
Oh, look, yeah. I mean, initially you got to get through the stages of, dealing with criticism, dealing with poor performance. There's a lot of those sorts of things. As an elite professional sportsman, you do put a lot of external pressure on yourself, and you've got to learn how to manage that as best as you can. So you've got to be able to get through the rigors, and then it comes with injuries, and then it comes with obviously poor performance, teams not performing that well. You've got the surroundings of players that are not playing. They might be injured, so you're feeling their effects as well. So there's a whole range of different combinations that you've got to be, on your guard for. And as a teenager at that stage, I was trying to obviously understand that, trying to be able to manage it as best I can. But you're just trying to adapt, and you're trying to be as present as you can, I guess, at that point in time. When you get a bit older, I think what happens is, I remember someone saying to me, when you're young, you're trying to get a game, you're trying to, you're running around, and blah, 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 you're buzzing. When you get a bit older, that you've got a game, that you're playing. So there's more heightened responsibility on you, but there's also more heightened responsibility on others to lift, because you want to then get to the stage where you want to win a premiership, you want to win games, you want to play finals footy. So all that then starts to join in. So you go through all those phases throughout your footy career where you're just trying to, you're trying to encourage everyone else, but there's such a wave that you go through, and then near the end of your career, you're just trying to hang on and try and play games, but you're trying to get as much out of your body and your mental side as well. So there's a huge wave that you go through, and that's exactly what I experienced through that whole time. So any adversity I've faced outside of footy, post footy, a lot of my memories and recollections have come from the adversities that I went through footy.
Now, there's a lot of footy pressure that we can see can take a toll on players for sure, but there's also this other pressure to be in the spotlight and be in the news a lot of the time, and having to be this certain person for young people, for adults, and being this sports person. Do you think that pressure is too much for players, and that's why sometimes we see players play up?
I think it's really controlled more so now. The AFL Players Association, and I'm sure, and there's other associations, players associations with other professional sports in Australia. But yeah, there is that responsibility when you're on and off the field, as we used to say, and you've got to weigh that tag, and that's all part of adapting to the environment of the AFL. There's a responsibility for sponsors. There's a responsibility to the AFL, which involves Auskick. There's a responsibility for members of the footy club. So it's the way and I used to love, that sort of, especially kids. I love kids. Got 3 kids myself, but really love the kids, and I'm so glad I actually did that, because now I get a lot of those kids that are now in their 20s and 30s saying, "Hey, you were my idol," blah, 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 and, reaching out via social media. So it becomes it's almost like if you have that attachment to that kid, it's almost for life, growing the game. But I think the other thing is too, that, when you go out in the public, you're always going to be recognized. People are going to be seeing who you are. And it's, at the end of the day, it's just really common sense. It's just common sense, the way you act in the public, and you just do the right thing. But there certainly is a lot of, external things that are available for AFL players. And there is going to be times where, there's issues at home, there's something wrong with family. So there's certainly a lot of great supporting networks AFL players and also former players as well.
And during your experience, did you find that support was there for you, both mentally and physically as a player?
I think more so physically. Mentally, it was back in my time. It was not what it is today. Where that support and that education has been really highlighted, especially over the last 5 years, probably, which has been great to see. But back in my time, it was, if you've got an injury, keep going, all that sort of stuff, which is all well and good. It's certainly one of the things that does do, it builds resilience. And we all need that. We all need to have resilience. You can't just wave the white flag and just give up. So, I don't take anything for granted. Not going to change anything like that. But certainly the mental side, mental health, all that sort of stuff is really paramount now. And I think that's really, really important, because there's kids that are getting drafted at 17, 18 years of age. You got to think that last 3 years they've been exposed to social media. They've been exposed to that negativity that can arise. And I love that the big social media companies are getting on board and helping this sort of stuff as well. But at the end of the day, you want to give these players as much clear space, no fog whatsoever, to go out and just let their instincts take over. There certainly is a lot more. It's a great balancing act now between physical and mental, which is what you need to perform at the highest level.
Yeah, of course. And then looking towards the end of your career, can you explain to us why you made that decision to hand in the towel and say no more?
Well, there was a couple of factors. I think that the club was going through a rebuilding phase. So at that time I was 31, so wasn't on their radar for future players. But the interesting part that happened with me during 2008 was that I started having dreams about sitting in front of a computer and wearing a suit. And it was a regular thing. It was quite common. I had no idea what it meant. But I look back now and go, well, I guess I'm wearing a t-shirt. I don't really like suits, but I like sitting in front of the computer. So I guess that's what was maybe a forecast for what I wanted to do. But there was a saying from Michael Jordan. He said that once I stop enjoying the game is when I walk away, and that was me. I put so much effort and time into those 14 years. Not only did we have our own strength and conditioning coach, I had my own personal trainer. I had a personal trainer in Melbourne. I had a personal trainer in the Gold Coast. I trained once, twice every day. Those days where I didn't train twice a day, I was playing golf. So I was always physical in some point, but it was more getting your body right, making sure you do everything you can. There'd be games where you're feeling really good and you go into the game and you don't perform that well, so you got to work on your weaknesses. There'd be games where you play really, really well and you come up sore, so you have to focus on your recovery. There's diet, a whole range of different things, and day in, day out, just doing that, which I love, completely love. But by the end of my career, I just knew that I was falling out of love of that. And I love doing weights. I love doing the extra sort of stuff. And there was a few moments during my last year of my career where I didn't enjoy that anymore. So that was purely a sign for me. So I made the right, I guess, the decision. I didn't want to force anything. I didn't want to force myself to actually go and train and force myself to perform at the highest level. Because once you force, as we know, things, doesn't work out the way you want.
Did you find that you lost yourself for a while after retiring from AFL, because you've been involved with it for so long and dedicated so many hours during the week to it, to then have none of that?
No, I wasn't someone. I was pretty humble, down to earth sort of person. I know a lot of players have struggled with that limelight and being in the limelight, all that sort of stuff. I wasn't like that. I was, that's why I live on the Gold Coast. So that's why I moved to the Gold Coast. So no one really knows me. But I was never that type of person. I never watched footy. I watched my opponent and did my research that way, but I wasn't entrenched in the AFL. Like I would go and watch other games, or watch games on TV, or be a part of the footy show, or doing any of that media sort of stuff. It was more focus on me, focus on the team, let the actions do their talking, and then sort of step out of limelight a little bit. So my transition wasn't too bad. I think later, particularly the last 4 or 5 years, is where I really struggled to, and I lost my identity, and that was the challenging part. But I'm glad that I was able to get through that, and I think the lessons that I learned throughout the history of football was able to get me through that.
And if you don't mind me asking, you say the last couple of years were a really challenging time for you. What took place in those years?
Well, it started in August 2017. So, prior to that, I was suffering a lot of fainting spells. It started in 2009, and being 6'5", falling from that height is, you say you broke your nose. I broke my nose several times with this happening. But it was mainly when I was from a horizontal position and went up to vertical. A lot of people would get dizzy, and they had to try and find themselves. Well, I would just collapse. So they couldn't figure out what was going on. But in August 2017, I thought I was having another episode, but this was different. It was in the morning. All my fainting spells had happened in the morning. This was 2 in the afternoon. But little did I know I was having a stroke. I had paralysis of my right arm. And anyway, so I didn't find that out for a couple of weeks after that. Once I did a few tests, I remember the doctor ringing me, say, ring me now. I'm like, oh my God, things go through your head.
Yeah.
What's the worst? All that sort of stuff becomes very scary time. But yeah, I suffered a stroke. So I didn't know that at the time. I had to go see the neurologist. So we're trying to figure out, you're 40 years of age at that time, healthy, how could you have a stroke, blah, blah, blah. You ask all these questions. So my mission was to obviously try and discover what was wrong, and found out I had a hole in my heart. So I was born with a hole in my heart. So went through all that footy career with a hole in my heart. So what was happening with the fainting spells is that especially in tall people, when you go from horizontal to vertical, the oxygen immediately goes to your brain to try and collaborate you so you can actually find your center of gravity. But because all the oxygen was going out the hole in my heart, it wasn't getting to my brain, so I just faint. So I didn't know that. So what happened was a lot of stress was built up throughout that year. There was a blood clot, and blood clots, when they go in your heart, they normally get thinned out, but this one went out of the hole, bang, straight to my brain, and that's what caused the paralysis in my right arm. So I found that out. So they said, and that was October 2017. So they said, look, you can't have, you have to have heart surgery, but you can't have it until February. So I'm like, okay, no worries, that's fine. So living with that fear, but knowing that I lived with it my whole life, it sort of eliminated that sort of fear. But the nervousness I had was having heart surgery. Now, I've had plenty of surgeries in my time, but having heart surgery is on another level. So had heart surgery. 2 days later, I got a letter from a former investor saying he's going to sue me. Okay, no worries. I'll cop that again. And then I got over that. Within two months, I was able to attract some investors, which was really good. Some wonderful investors for the company I was with. And then 3 days after that, my wife left me. Okay, all right, let's have a deep breath. So in the space of 5 months, that's what happened. And looking back now, what I didn't do is I didn't heal after each trauma, pain, heartache that I suffered. I just went, okay, well, I'm a very optimistic person. I thought, I'll be right. It'll work out. But then, so I do the separation, move into house, and it was more my share of looking after the kids than what it was with my ex-wife. So I had the responsibility, which is good because it got me really active and allowed me to focus on the kids and not dwell on the past. So I didn't see anyone, didn't date anyone, and then met someone at the end of 2020 out of the blue. A lot of universal moments happened between us, and yeah, I was a bit protective to start with because I knew some external friends, and we literally fell in love. And I think when you discover yourself, it can either come from, obviously relationships, can come from a loss, a family member that you lose, or any walks of life. For me, it came through this relationship, and it was also built up from not healing from previous pain and trauma. So we spoke about marriage, we spoke about a whole range of different things, obviously in the relationship type. And I remember she saying, one evening, I can't wait to marry you. And then, the next morning it was gone, it was over. And it just rocked me. It just really shocked me. It really put me on the back foot. And I look back now and say, thank you, it happened, because I was able to find my self-identity. But at the time it was so difficult. And it was such a build-up from all the previous stuff that I hadn't healed from any of those trauma. I hadn't healed from the stroke. I hadn't healed from heart surgery. In my mind, I hadn't actually just sat down and went, you know what? This has happened for a reason. I've got to try and learn from it. Just one thing built up over and over another. And then when this happened, I had no self-esteem. I was lost. I was rocked. There's too many external noises going on. So I just had to dig deep, back against the wall, and it took me a while. But I guess what got me through was previous history of footy, going through adversity, being resilient, continuing to believe in myself. And then the turning point was just actually working on routines for myself, focusing on myself. And I've been such a selfless person in my life that right now I had to work on me, and I had to say no to a lot of things. I had to try and protect my boundaries. And what I eventually found was that once I started getting in the daily routines of what I wanted to do for me and what I could control, everything else started to fall into place. And it just become, something that I could control. Previously, everything else I was trying to control, and I was trying to force it, but it just wasn't happening because it was out of my control. I was trying to force things to happen. And then in October, I experienced what you would call a spiritual awakening. And this one particular day, it just felt like everything just lifted. Everything just left my body, all the stress, all the weight. And for the first time in over a decade, I just started hearing messages of, it might sound a bit weird, but, you're 6'5", you're broad shoulders, you're a wonderful person, you're a good person, you got a heart of gold. All these words just started hitting me as that self-talk becomes so powerful. And I hadn't heard that for a long time, and it was just a crazy time, and still get goosebumps thinking about it. But I think it was purely because of the self-work I'd done previously. If I hadn't have actually committed to working on myself, this wouldn't have happened. If this particular person hadn't have cancelled, our relationship, this wouldn't have happened. So things happen for a reason, but you've got to be able to assess that. You've got to be able to heal from those sorts of things that do happen. Sometimes we don't have the answers for it, but they come later on. And then throughout my footy career, I used to search for words to motivate me. So I'd find a word, go to Google, find some sort of poem or some motivational quote, and then I would just hold on to that to get me back on track. What I find now after that spiritual awakening day is that words come to me and I write quotes. So I started writing quotes. And at that stage, I wasn't on social media. I took a bar because my previous was heavily involved in social media. So that was an external noise that I couldn't control, but I could if I could remove it by not being on social media. So I didn't want to have any of that negative triggers. So that's part of working on yourself. And anyway, so these words started coming to me. I'm like, okay, I'll just write the word, and all of a sudden I'm writing a quote, and all of a sudden it's rhyming, and all of a sudden I'm feeling good. I'm like holding on to that. And then I got back on social media and I started delivering that, and people started gravitating towards those messages, and hence what I do now. Wow. So there's a snapshot of the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow. Congratulations. I mean, from turning all that around, it sounds like it's been really tough for you, and I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. But talking back and taking you back to those tough moments, how did you get up each day knowing that you just keep getting hit after hit after hit, and potentially a lot of people would give up in those instances and not want to try any longer? Why did you keep trying and keep going?
Look, it's a lot of it comes from my background from footy, but I'm writing a workbook at the moment. It's called it's going to be released soon I'm just going through all the critiquing sort of stuff, but I was just writing that moments last night and a part of the workbook. And one thing I recall back is that I wake up praying and forcing things to happen, whereas I wasn't making things happen. And what I've learned by having your daily routines in place, I can control part of my day. So I always wake up at between 4:30 and 5:30, so I can control that. I always deliver a quote, so I can control that. I always run, so I can control that. I have a coffee by myself with music on, I can control that. So what I've found is that when I have those routines in place, I know what to expect. I know that a real big portion of my day is set, and and those are things I love. Those are things I love writing. I love running. I love having a coffee. So I love listening to music. So they're things I love. It's not things I like, because if you like something, it becomes a chore. So I really get up every morning, really looking forward to those sorts of things. And you have the responsibility of kids. I'm a single father of 3 boys, so there's school and there's training, but I know that those things are set, right? Going back previously, I'd wake up praying, hoping, oh, this is going to happen. I want this to happen. So I'm actually forcing things and not actually having control of it. I can't control those sorts of things. So that's the biggest difference that I've really discovered, is that once I've sent it back to me and focused on what I could control and not what I can't control, it's made my mind is so present. I knew I had the meeting with you, but I know what my schedule is for today, and that's it. I'm not thinking about what happened yesterday. I'm not anxious about what's going to happen tonight for dinner, because I don't even know what I'm going to cook for dinner. I'm not anxious about those things. My mind is so present. And that only happens because of the commitment I've made to myself. So that's the biggest difference for me, and the biggest, mindset, which is, a lot of people get stuck. What happens is your mind thinks about the past, and then your mind keeps asking questions about the past. And all of a sudden you're thinking, there's too many tentacles attaching to that, which you can't control. Obviously, it's happened. And then you think about the future, and that hasn't even happened yet, but you're still worried and anxious about it. But if you stay present, what happens is your mind starts thinking about solving problems for that. So if you've got those routines in place, it starts, like yesterday, I can't run on the grass. I have to run on grass because of the wear and tear of my body. But I thought, well, I haven't run on the road since October, so that'll be fine. So I had to adapt. So my mind is already thinking about things that I want to do for my day, not thinking about the past or the future. So it's really, it's something that I'm really preaching and really trying to encourage people to do, is to have the daily routines.
That's amazing advice, and I think it's incredible. I know routines always helped me go my journey as well. It's just focusing on that day to day instead of looking towards the future, or, as you said, stressing about the past, because at the moment you can only control your present. So I think it's absolutely phenomenal advice. If we look at, you said as well that you've learn to love in relationships and learn to trust people. Do you think that you've healed those relationships in terms of learning to trust potentially one day again?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing that you need to do. You need to forgive. You can't, and that's, you just dwell. If you carry that burden, then you're dwelling on the past, which doesn't help you. It's not, and you can't control people's feelings. I mean, the relationship I had was so beautiful, but the lesson learned was that I knew what love was again, because that obviously had sort of diminished throughout my marriage. So I knew what love meant again. And if it wasn't for her cancelling a relationship, I won't say dumping, but if it wasn't for her, going her path, I wouldn't have been able to find myself love. I wouldn't have been able to find myself identity. So at that point in time, that was extremely hard to swallow. But now I look back and go, well, that's why it happened. That's the reason why it happened. And with my ex-wife, we're very amicable now. It's all about the kids. It's not personal anymore. And she can be very personal. She can be a very pessimistic person. So if that's the case, then I've learned to deal with that. I've learned to be very diplomatic about that, because that's what I can control. I can't control her behavior. So it's just really strong focus for me is that forgiving part, and still having the optimistic approach to saying that things are going to happen, but making sure that I focus on what I can control. Because at the end of the day, I think what a lot of people do is they, one, compare themselves on social media. They can't control that, can't control what other people are doing. They dwell on what's happened in the past that's gone, and they get anxious and create their unwanted anxiety of the future that hasn't even happened yet. I mean, there's a perfect saying from Michael Jordan. He said, basically, you know, why am I worrying about the future when it hasn't even happened yet? So it's such a true way to actually stay present.
Yeah, of course. And if we look about the term, the concept of self-love, which you preach, and it's phenomenal, and I find it is very much accepted in the female space. The male sort of space, it's not so much accepted yet, because I feel there's still a lot of stigma attached to men embracing or learning to love themselves, because it is seen as a feminine thing. How do you break down that stigma and encourage men to learn to love themselves?
Yeah, look, I think I've had a lot of former athletes from all different sporting codes. I've had a lot of males reach out to me privately via Instagram, you know, I'm trying to understand that more, and I love that. And I have obviously females as well, but the stigma is basically what I'm trying to say to them is to actually appreciate you. We cheer a lot for others, but we don't actually cheer enough for ourselves. And females are very open to that. They'll be very very open to cheering for others, and they'll be very open to cheering to themselves. But males are very reserved, particularly in the show. I find that you know, Americans are very flamboyant. Sporting, you know, look at sporting people and actors and stuff. They're all about them, and they talk about them. And you only have to go Kevin Hart or The Rock. They're all about that. They're all about that self-love. But I think we're very reserved in Australia in that male context. And it goes back to, you know, if he's going to voice his opinion, if he's thinking about what others are thinking, instead of just going, no, this is what I believe in, this is what I want to do. So, and I feel also too that I can sort of, with my past profile of being in the limelight, I think people can, I guess, have that added trust immediately, that connection. And, you know, I'm speaking to the AFL Players Association at the moment about doing this sort of, being in this sort of space, which is really important. And I think what's happened is that a lot of people have spoken about, you know, a team environment, and they talk about the team, but they don't actually speak about the individual. I'm such a big believer in, if you can focus in a team environment, if you could focus on you individually, what you can improve on, what areas you can focus on, then collectively as a team become very powerful. So yeah, people are gonna, that's the thing. I mean, my self-identity and self-love is so powerful that if people want to listen, they listen. If they don't, then don't. It's your choice. I can't control that. I just know what I feel. I know what I've gone through. I know how powerful it is, and I just want to be able to help and guide people to doing that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's also a stigma that can be attached to it, that people that preach self-love or think about themselves are arrogant. How do we break down that stigma? Because I find that is it's so known in our culture as well. And often I catch myself sometimes seeing people, and if they're talking about themselves a lot, and they might appreciate and love themselves a lot, but because they're expressing that so much, we do judge them and think that they're up themselves.
Yeah. Well, I was actually saying that in my workbook that I'm working on, is that if someone comes out and they're very, you know, hey, how you doing? But how you feeling? Yeah, I'm over the top of the world. Like, yeah, there is that stigma. Of course there is. But I talk a lot about self-talk. I think this comes back to what we were speaking about before about, you know, that 17-year-old kid that went over to Fremantle, spent a lot of alone time, had to do a lot of self-motivation, a lot of self-talk. So I talk a lot about that. I don't, being the humble person that I have been throughout my footy career, I was never that type of person. So, and it's, if people want to be that way, that, you know, so be it. That's how they that's how they roll, I guess. But I guess the way, go for it. But the way I'm sort of been mentioning it and through my social media is to basically say that you've got to, appreciate yourself. Even like little reward yourself along the way. You don't need to share that with people, but if you're on this journey and you're making progress, reward yourself. All that sort of self appreciation, self accolades. It's all well and good to get accolades from someone else, but at the end of the day, if you don't appreciate yourself and appreciate what you love, then you've got a lot of work to do. So that's why those daily routines are really important, because you do things that you love, and then you really appreciate that. And I mean, since I've been doing I've been running pretty much every day since October. I found that even though I haven't said anything, just my actions have actually, people on social media have said that they started running. A lot of my close buddies I live with here on the golf course have started running. They haven't said anything, but I know that they've, it's my influence is on them. So yeah, I feel that the self-talk is really, really powerful.
It's like paying it forward in an unintentional way.
Yeah, you don't have to be, jump on top of a rooftop and shout it out. You just let your actions do the talking, I guess. And if they see the way you portray your life and portray who you are and the way you walk day to day, then it will eventually wear off, and eventually they will see that, and that's when it becomes very powerful.
Is that what you try to instill in your kids at a young age, that self-love?
Oh, yes. I actually had a moment last night. Well, actually, it happens a lot. But one of my twin boys, my twins who are 11, so Taj and Kai, and I got a 14-year-old boy, Kalani. Taj was really aggravated last night, was trying to work something out, and I said, well, it'll work out. Something will work out. We can't. He just had a little button that was wrong with his controller for his gaming thing, and I went upstairs, and his twin brother said, no, I've got a spare one, you can borrow that. So it worked out. So I'm always installing that, things will happen. Don't force it. If you force it, then it makes the next thing even worse. I was saying that to Kalani in relation to Tiger Woods. I love my golf, so a lot of my theory comes from golf, and Tiger Woods had a 5-yard theory. His 5-yard theory was he gets upset on a golf shot for 5 yards, or he celebrates his good shot for 5 yards, then he lets it go. And letting go is the key, because he found that when he was young, he would get upset about that shot, and the next shot would be even worse. So he had a 5-yard theory that he would say to his caddy, let's celebrate this for 5 yards, or I'm going to get angry for 5 yards, then it's gone. Move on. So you keep that process going forward. And it's so true. So that's what I try and install into the kids. And I always say to them, trust daddy, it's going to work out. Sometimes it doesn't, but that often when it doesn't work out the way they plan actually leads to something better, and which they find very fascinating. So I love doing that. And even before I discovered myself, I was trying to always been that optimistic person. I think I've just got a bit of a sharper edge on how I deliver it now.
Yeah, of course. And what you're doing is incredible in this space, sharing those amazing messages. Looking back on your entire career and your entire life to this point, what do you think are your main lessons and takeaways that you could share to others now?
Try and remain present. Just try and get in the flow. I think I'm such a big believer in the universe, universal messages and stuff like that. I always used to feel that, but more so now after what happened in October. So I think it's about staying present and really controlling what you can control. I think I think social media highlights it even more, even though I've been involved in social media for over a decade now. But control what you can control, because if you start trying to force other things, or trying to force what people feel about you, or force things that are not happening, you just waste your energy on stuff that you can't control. So my big message is to try and stay present and try and focus on things that you can control. And you put your head on the pillow each night thinking that, you know, you've had a productive day. You're not, and that's where all the regrets and how the anxiety builds up, because you focus on things you can't control.
Yeah.
So it's a strong enough message, I guess, I can push, and that's what I push out on my social media.
Yeah, amazing. It is phenomenal, and you should definitely go check out Jeff on that. Where can everyone find you to check out all those amazing messages and reels that I always see on Instagram?
Just Instagram mainly. Instagram is at JeffWhite34. I'm just building my website at the moment, so I'm really excited about that. So the Discover Self-Love workbook's coming out. I've got my quotes that you can be able to purchase if you want, in relation to, you know, whether it's in a book format or whether it's on posters. A lot of people have been asking about that. So when I first started this, I didn't know where it was going to end up. But you know, that's what people are asking for. So I'm going to put it out there. And I've got a podcast as well. The podcast is on Spotify and Apple, called Finding Self-Love. So I do 2 a week. So I've got Follow Your Intuition, or Trust Your Intuition, I think it's going to be called, and Courage, which will be out this week.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I just want to take a moment to just congratulate you on your phenomenal journey. I know it's been bumpy. We've all got those bumps in our journey, but it has been phenomenal. And to see where you are now and how you're thriving, and, you know, now sharing that with others, it is honestly incredible. And you should be so proud of everything you've done, because you're really changing the space.
Thank you, Ashley, and sorry about the internet connection throughout our interview.
That's right.
I really apologise for that.
Typical in this age, something always goes wrong, but you adapt.
Yeah, you adapt. Exactly right. You have to adapt. But no, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And a shout out to all your listeners or your viewers or whoever's there. Stay present. It's really, really powerful. And control what you can control. Makes your life a lot easier.
Phenomenal message. And once again, thank you everyone else out there for joining us today for another Secret Sunday session. We will say goodbye, and I will catch you guys again in 2 weeks, but check out Jeff online, and we'll see you all soon.